Welcome, dear traveller, to the world asleep. Tonight, beneath the endless Egyptian sky, the great Sphinx lies waiting. Half lion, half man, it has watched the sun rise for thousands of years, its gaze fixed on the horizon of eternity. Around it, the desert glows gold and silent, a sea of sand guarding a riddle that no pharaoh ever claimed to solve. The kings of Egypt carved their triumphs on every wall, left songs for their gods, and built tombs that touch the heavens, yet none ever said, "I built this." The Sphinx remains anonymous, older perhaps than their dynasties, older than history's own breath. Its body bears the marks of rain from an age when Egypt was green, when no empire yet stood on the Nile's banks. Who then shaped this giant from living rock? And what dream were they trying to preserve in stone? As the dawnlight touches its face, it seems almost alive, ancient eyes opening for a moment before drifting back into timeless sleep. We stand before it, wondering if it remembers all that has come and gone, all that we have forgotten. So settle in, wherever you are, maybe beneath your own quiet sky, maybe listening in the soft hours between night and morning. Take a breath, let the world slow. And if this journey brings you calm, you can gently like or subscribe, so the next dreamer can find their way here too. The wind moves across the dunes, whispering secrets no one has written. The horizon glows, and as the sun rises over Giza, our story begins with the desert's first breath. Chapter 1. The Desert's First Breath. The dawn comes slowly over Giza, as it always has, a pale gold unfurling across the horizon, soft as the first thought of morning. The air is cool for a moment, the kind of fragile calm that vanishes before the heat. Then the light deepens, touching the sands until they shimmer like water, until the pyramids wake from shadow. And between them, rising from the very bones of the desert, the great Sphinx waits, vast, still, and watching. To stand before it is to feel time loosen its hold. The hum of the modern world falls away, replaced by a silence so wide it almost seems alive. Wind moves like breath through the dunes, shaping and reshaping them as it has for ages. The desert is never truly still. It only appears to be. Beneath the sand lies an ocean of stories, layered and folded, each one pressed deeper with every century that drifts past. The Sphinx is one such story, written not in ink, but in stone, carved from a single ridge of limestone that once slept beneath the surface of an ancient sea. That bedrock, millions of years old, still bears the ripples of waves that touched it before the first city, before the first king, before humankind itself. When the sculptors began their work, whoever they were shaping the bones of the earth, a creature born from a creature far older. They carved until a lion emerged, its paws stretching eastward toward the rising sun, its face half divine, half human. Some say it is the face of a pharaoh, perhaps Khafre, builder of the second pyramid, but others believe it is the face of something deeper, the union of man and eternity, the dawn taking shape in flesh and stone. The Sphinx was never meant to be seen quickly. Its power grows the longer one lingers. At first it seems immense but simple, a guardian watching the horizon. Then, as the light shifts, its features change, kind, solemn, unreadable. The longer you gaze, the more you feel its silence working on you, drawing you inward, as though it were not a statue at all, but a thought the desert itself once dreamed and never forgot. Archaeologists have measured every inch of it. They can tell you the depth of its pores, the angle of its head, the strata of limestone from which it was born. But there is something in its presence that no measurement can contain. Its face, though weathered and broken, carries a tenderness, not of vanity, but of patience. as if it has waited all these centuries for us to stop looking for answers and simply listen. To the ancients, the desert was not empty. It was alive with gods and memory. Every dune was a shifting page, every horizon a veil between worlds. The Nile, with its rhythm of flood and renewal, was life's heartbeat, but the desert was its soul, the place where time could rest. The Sphinx rose at the boundary between these realms, river and desert, life and death, motion and stillness. To cross from one to the other, one had to pass beneath its gaze. It was not only a monument, it was a threshold. In the early morning, the air around it hums with quiet energy. The stones hold the night's coolness. The ground smells faintly of salt and dust. Far to the west, the pyramids catch the sun and flare with light, their sharp edges dissolving in heat. The Sphinx, however, remains soft in shadow, half illuminated, half dreaming. Its lion's body seems ready to move, yet it never will. It embodies what the desert teaches best: endurance without struggle, being without noise. Thousands of years ago, when the first travellers approached Giza, they must have felt the same awe. Perhaps they camped nearby, their fires flickering against its stone. Perhaps they whispered prayers into the wind, asking who had made such a thing. Even then, it would have been ancient. Even then, the answer was lost. The desert has no need for records. It remembers in silence. The dunes erase footsteps, cover ruins, cradle secrets until they become indistinguishable from the sand itself. Yet sometimes when the wind shifts, a hint of what was returns. A fragment of pottery, a buried wall, the trace of a forgotten civilization. Each discovery reminds us that Egypt was not born in isolation. It was built upon layers of older worlds. Before the pharaohs, there were people who lived when the Sahara was green, who hunted by lakes now vanished, who raised stones to mark the stars. Perhaps the Sphinx is their echo, the last breath of that first world, preserved by the desert that devoured it. When night falls again, and the sky turns blue-black above the pyramids, the Sphinx seems to wake. The moon paints its face with silver, and shadows pool in its hollow eyes. Some say that in the silence between the wind's sighs you can almost hear a heartbeat, faint, steady, ancient. It is not the sound of life, but of persistence. In truth, the Sphinx does not speak in words. Its message is older than language. It speaks through presence, through the way its form catches the light, through the way the air stills around it, through the strange ache that settles in your chest when you realize how much it has seen and how little it has said. It reminds us that history is not written only in what we know, but in what endures beyond knowing. As dawn returns, the colours change once more. Pale rose, then amber, then white. The heat begins to rise, and the desert comes alive with sound, the hiss of sand against stone, the call of distant birds, the hum of unseen insects. The Sphinx stands motionless through it all, watching as though every sunrise is both the first and the last. No one can truly say when it was made, or by whose hand. The official stories tell us it belongs to Khafre, but the evidence is faint, the records uncertain. What is certain is that even in the age of the pharaohs it was already a mystery. To them it was a relic, something inherited, not created. And so they gave it names of reverence, calling it Hore-Machet, horizon of the sun god. In its silent gaze they saw the rising of Ra himself. It is strange to think that we too are now part of that same chain of wonder, each generation staring into its ancient face, each trying to read its thoughts. The Sphinx does not change, only we do. It reflects not the past but ourselves, and in doing so reminds us how small and brief our own stories are. The desert wind rises again, sweeping across the plateau, erasing the footprints of another day. The Sphinx endures as it always has, carved from the bones of the world, watching the sun it will never stop greeting. And as the light fades once more and the coolness of evening returns, the air carries a whisper, the sound of sand shifting over stone, of history rearranging itself. It is the first breath of something deeper, something older than Egypt itself. Beyond the pyramids, where the dunes blur into distance, another mystery waits, a name given by those who came after, to a creature born of the dawn. And so, as the sun sinks below the horizon, the lion of the desert stirs in legend once more, and the story of the horizon god begins. Chapter 2. The Lion of the Dawn. When the first light touches the horizon, the Sphinx awakens, not with motion, but with meaning. The desert glows pale gold, and its vast stone face softens in the warmth of the rising sun. For thousands of years it has greeted the morning in silence, always looking east, as though remembering something that began with the light itself. To the ancients, this was no accident. The Sphinx was Hora Market, Horus of the horizon, the very embodiment of dawn. In Egypt, every sunrise was an act of rebirth. The sun god Ra sailed across the sky in his celestial boat, descended into darkness each night, and returned renewed with the morning light. The Sphinx faced this eternal cycle with unblinking eyes, carved not merely as a guardian, but as a witness to resurrection. To stand before it at sunrise was to stand at the threshold between life and eternity. The people who gathered at its feet believed that its gaze held power, the power to connect heaven and earth. They brought offerings of milk, bread, incense and myrrh, laying them in the dust before its paws. Priests chanted softly to the horizon, their voices drifting like smoke over the plain. The Sphinx, they said, carried the breath of the gods. Its lion's body symbolized strength, its human face, divine consciousness. It was both beast and spirit, the bridge between mortal and eternal. In their language of symbols, lions were more than animals. They were emblems of the sun's fierce energy, of guardianship and renewal. Every pharaoh took the lion as a sign of divine authority, echoing its might in their statues and their crowns. But the Sphinx was more than a royal symbol. It was the original lion, carved when God still walked beside men. Its presence sanctified the dawn itself, turning each sunrise into a ritual. Even now, in the early hours, the desert seems to hold its breath. The air is cool, faintly sweet with the scent of sand and stone. Birds begin to stir near the Nile, calling softly in the distance. The first rays of the sun slide over the Sphinx's worn headdress, lighting its eyes with fire. For a few brief moments it appears alive, as though the soul of Horus still inhabits its stone heart. Horus, the falcon-headed god, was the sky. His right eye the sun, his left the moon. He was the child of Isis and Osiris, born from grief and vengeance, destined to reclaim the world from shadow. In him, Egypt saw the promise of balance restored. And so, the Sphinx, gazing eternally at the dawn, became Horus made flesh, a sentinel to remind the world that darkness always yields to light. Perhaps that is why even the pharaohs revered it as something older than themselves. By the time they built their pyramids, the Sphinx already looked ancient. Its face was weathered, its body buried to the shoulders in sand. Yet they saw in it the image of the gods they served. It was said that to look upon the Sphinx at sunrise was to look upon the soul of the sun itself. But myths change like the dunes, shaped by wind and time. In later centuries, when dynasties fell and new empires rose, the Sphinx was given new names and new meanings. Some called it the Father of Terror, believing it guarded sacred tombs with supernatural strength. Others saw it as a fallen god, buried for disobedience. Its silence became both holy and haunting, a mystery no one dared disturb. And still, the desert moved around it. The Nile shifted its course, the temples crumbled, the sky filled with the dust of centuries. Yet the Sphinx endured, its gaze forever eastward, following a sun that never failed to return. There is something deeply human in that constancy. For all our empires, our inventions, our endless pursuit of progress, we too look to the light each morning, as if some part of us remembers what the Sphinx knows. That existence itself is a ritual of renewal. We rise, we endure, we wait for dawn. To imagine the Sphinx's makers, whether they were pharaohs or a people long forgotten, is to imagine hands guided not only by skill, but by faith. They carved not for glory, but for alignment, shaping the stone so that its eyes would meet the horizon precisely where the sun was reborn. The act itself was prayer made permanent, a gesture to the divine written in earth and time. Archaeologists have studied its symmetry, noting how the Sphinx aligns perfectly with the path of the rising sun at equinox. In that harmony lies intention. Whoever built it understood the language of the heavens. To them, astronomy was not science but devotion, the sky a scripture written in light. The Sphinx was their offering to that celestial order, a guardian watching over the sacred geometry between earth and sky. And yet, beneath that brilliance lies a riddle. If the Sphinx truly represents Horus of the horizon, why does it bear no inscription? Why no dedication to Ra? No hymn to the morning sun? The Egyptians chronicled everything. The lives of kings, the names of workers, even the height of the Nile's flood. But not this. The monument's silence feels intentional, as though its makers wanted it to remain a question, a meditation carved in stone. Perhaps they understood that mystery endures longer than explanation. Perhaps the Sphinx was never meant to tell us who built it, but to remind us of what it means to build for eternity, to create something that will outlast understanding. When the sun climbs higher, its light grows fierce. The Sphinx's face, half eroded, takes on new dimensions, half man, half spirit, half something else entirely. The eyes seem to look through time, past us, into the horizon that forever calls. It is not the face of power, but of patience, the patience of stone that has watched the world remake itself countless times. The desert hums quietly around it. The heat deepens, the colour of the sand turns to fire, and the horizon trembles like a mirage. The Sphinx stands unchanged, but its meaning shifts with every breath of wind. To the priest of old, it was Horus. To the pharaohs, a protector. To us, perhaps, a question carved by the dawn itself. And somewhere in that silence, in the still air between sun and stone, lies the heart of the riddle. Not who built it, but why it endures. As the day grows older and shadows shorten across the plateau, the Sphinx's face fades into brightness, its features dissolving in the glare. The light is too strong to see its details. It becomes a silhouette, pure form without identity. And in that blinding moment, it becomes what it has always been, a reflection of the sun it serves, a mirror of time itself. But as the sun descends again, the desert begins to cool, and the Sphinx's features return, softened and ancient, like memory resurfacing after long sleep. The wind stirs the sand against its pores, whispering through cracks of stone. It sounds almost like breath, and just as the last edge of sunlight slips below the horizon, the desert darkens, and the Sphinx returns to shadow. The night belongs to silence once more. Yet beyond the silence there is something else, a deeper truth forming in the dark. The Sphinx, scarred and eternal, bears the marks not only of time, but of water. Its body ripples with patterns left not by wind or sand, but by rain. And so the mystery deepens, flowing backward through the ages, toward a time when Egypt was green and alive. And as the stars bloom over Giza, the desert begins to whisper again, not of gods, but of storms long past, of rivers and rains that shaped the stone before the first pharaoh dreamed of his crown. Chapter 3. The Weathering of Time. The Sphinx sleeps beneath the stars, its body half-shadowed, its face turned always to the east. But if you walk close and run your hand along the stone, you can feel something more than the weight of years. The surface ripples like a memory, smooth here, carved away there, patterned with grooves that flow not downward like the work of wind, but vertical, as if shaped by falling rain. It is as though the sky itself once brushed this creature with tears. Geologists have studied those patterns, tracing their slow and ancient lines. What they found changed everything. The marks upon the Sphinx's body do not belong to a dry desert, but to an age of water, thousands of years before the pharaohs built their pyramids. Rain, not sand, once fell here in abundance, and if rain once touched these stones, then the land itself was different, green, fertile, alive. The desert we know today was once a plain of rivers and lakes, a cradle of early life. To imagine it is to travel back through layers of silence to a time before the Sahara turned to gold. The air then would have been thick with moisture, heavy with the scent of grass and flowers. Herds of animals moved through savannas beneath a gentler sun, and perhaps, in the midst of that abundance, humans too found their place. Communities older than kings, building with purpose and meaning. The Sphinx, some say, is their echo. When the rain stopped and the land dried, the people who lived through that change would have watched their world vanish day by day. Rivers shrinking, lakes dying, crops failing. Perhaps they built in stone because they feared impermanence, because they wanted to preserve what the sky had taken away. Perhaps they carved the Sphinx as both memory and prayer, a guardian to watch over the desert that would come, a promise to the gods that they would not be forgotten. The science of erosion supports this dream. Experts like Robert Schoch, studying the depth of the weathering on the Sphinx's enclosure walls, have suggested that it must have faced centuries of heavy rainfall, conditions that ended around 5000 BCE, long before Egypt's recorded history began. Mainstream Egyptologists disagree, pointing to the reign of Khafra around 2500 BCE as the monument's likely origin. But even among those who doubt the older date, few can look at the stone surface without sensing the pull of something ancient, something that feels deeper than dynasties. The Sphinx has been restored many times across the millennia. Pharaohs, Greeks, Romans, all tried to repair what time had undone. But beneath each layer of plaster, beneath every careful carving, lies the original surface, still scarred by the long-vanished rain. Those marks are not mere damage, they are writing, nature's own script, describing an age that no human text remembers. Close your eyes and imagine the storm, the horizon dark, the air trembling with thunder. Rain falls in waves upon the plateau, washing the limestone smooth, soaking the earth where pyramids will one day rise. Lightning flickers across the plain, revealing the shape of a colossal lion taking form from the rock. It is both a dream and a prophecy, the desert's first breath, learning to speak in stone. And when the rain ceased, when the last clouds vanished and the sun claimed the sky, the Sphinx remained. It watched as the rivers dried, as forests turned to dust, as the world around it forgot what water felt like. Slowly the wind took over where rain had left off. The sand rose, drifted, and began to bury the monument it could not erase. The Sphinx sank deeper year by year, until only its head remained above the dunes, like a memory peering out from the past. Even in this slow burial, there is poetry. The Sphinx's silence became its survival. The sand that hid it also preserved it, protecting it from the sun's cruel heat. Every few centuries, a ruler or a wanderer would uncover it again, free it for a while, and then let it sleep once more. Each rediscovery added a new story to its name. Each forgetting made it older still. But those grooves, the lines of ancient rain, remained, whispering of a time no scribe had written about. To the Egyptians, they were not clues, but signs of divinity. The gods themselves, they believed, had shaped the Sphinx through water and wind. It was not for men to ask when or how. They simply bowed before it, acknowledging a creation beyond their understanding. Yet today, we cannot help but ask. Our age demands reasons, origins, proofs. We measure, scan, date, and debate, trying to fit the Sphinx into the neat timeline of civilization, but the stone resists. It does not conform to what we expect. Its story flows like the erosion on its flanks, layered, fluid, impossible to trace to a single point of beginning. What if it is not a monument of kings, but of transitions? A relic of the moment when humanity first began to dream in permanence, to look at the world not as a cycle of seasons, but as a history that could be written, remembered, preserved. The Sphinx might then be the first page of that history, the bridge between prehistory and the dawn of civilization. At night, the temperature drops, and the air over Giza cools with a sigh. The stars shimmer above the dark outline of the Sphinx, and for a moment it seems to rest once again beneath the sea that birthed its stone. The grooves in its surface catch starlight like ancient rivers gleaming in the dark. It looks both wounded and immortal, its body wearing the memory of storms long gone. Some travellers claim that the Sphinx seems alive at night, its expression changing with the moonlight. In its features they see kindness, sadness, endurance. Perhaps what they're seeing is not life, but reflection. Our own longing projected onto something that has endured what we cannot. The desert wind rises again, sweeping across the plateau, stirring the sand that once buried the monument whole. The dunes whisper like distant rain, faint echoes of the storms that carved the Sphinx's skin. It is as though the desert itself remembers that wetter age, sighing through time, and in that sound, the hiss of sand over stone, the murmur of wind through hollow crevices, there is the faintest suggestion of water. You can almost hear it, the memory of a river, a rainfall, a world that once breathed differently. Perhaps that is the Sphinx's true purpose, not to guard the tombs of kings, but to guard memory itself, to remind us that all things change, and that within even the harshest desert lies the ghost of water, the promise of renewal. The night deepens. The stars turn above the horizon like slow, patient clocks. The Sphinx does not move, yet everything around it does. The sand, the sky, the centuries. It endures, marked by rain, reborn through silence. And as the dawn approaches again, pale and fragile on the edge of the desert, a new thought stirs in the mind of the traveller who stands before it. If the rain once shaped this stone, then perhaps other hands shaped it too, hands as old as the storms, as forgotten as the rivers that fed them. Beyond the horizon of history, the builders without names wait to be remembered. Chapter 4. The builders without names. The morning sun spreads its light across the plateau, and the Sphinx glows as though lit from within. Its eyes, worn, cracked and hollowed by time, seem to gaze not at the horizon, but beyond it, into something we can no longer see. Around it lie fragments of ancient temples, blocks of limestone tumbled and scorched by centuries of wind. To the modern visitor, these ruins speak of empire, but the Sphinx itself does not. It speaks of something older, an origin unclaimed, a silence untouched by royal decree. Egypt was a land of meticulous record-keeping. Every pharaoh etched his triumphs into stone, carved his name on statues, engraved his lineage upon temple walls. They feared being forgotten more than death itself. Yet not one inscription names the builder of the Sphinx. Not one line of hieroglyphs claims its creation. It simply was, already ancient, already revered. When later kings built temples near its feet, they did so in homage, not authorship. They inherited a god they didn't create. So who then carved the Sphinx? Mainstream history tells us it was made under Khafre, the pharaoh who ruled around 2500 BCE. The face, some argue, resembles his own, though the resemblance is debated and time has softened all certainty. Yet even if Khafre commissioned the carving, even if it was his workers who struck the stone, the question remains, why did he leave no record? Why in a culture obsessed with legacy would a king remain silent about his grandest monument? Perhaps because he did not build it. Perhaps he found it, half buried, mysterious, waiting. Imagine it, a young ruler ascending to power, walking through the sands where his pyramid would one day rise. There, emerging from the dunes, the head of a colossal creature, its eyes closed, its body lost beneath centuries of dust. To discover such a thing would not be to invent, but to inherit, to claim guardianship over something already divine. Khafre may have restored it, reshaped its features, built temples in its shadow, but the monument itself, its foundation, its core, may have belonged to an earlier age, one unrecorded, one erased by time. Archaeologists have found hints of this buried inheritance. The bedrock of the Sphinx enclosure bears signs of deep weathering that predate the structures around it. The valley temple beside it, built from enormous limestone blocks cut from the Sphinx's own quarry, shows construction methods older than the classical Old Kingdom style. Its precision is immense, blocks weighing over 200 tons fitted together without mortar, their surfaces polished smooth. Such skill seems to appear fully formed, as though carried forward from a civilization that had already mastered it. But that civilization left no names, no records, no trace except what endures in stone. They are ghosts of the prehistoric world. People of the Green Sahara, whose descendants perhaps migrated to the Nile when their lakes vanished and their grasslands died. They may have been herders and builders, astronomers and dreamers, watching the stars and carving symbols that echoed the heavens. In that fading age, the world was changing. The rain stopped, the earth dried, lakes turned to salt. Perhaps, as the climate shifted, those forgotten ancestors carved the Sphinx as both farewell and plea, as if to say, "We were here. We knew the sun. We will not be erased." And then they vanished. The desert is an excellent keeper of secrets. It erases gently, burying without cruelty. What it hides, it preserves. Beneath the sands around Giza, there may still lie fragments of that vanished age. Stone tools, half-finished carvings, bones bleached white by millennia. Each new discovery hints at something older still, a deep, continuous thread connecting the first builders of the Nile to those who later called themselves kings. Yet beyond the scientific clues, there is something more elusive, the feeling one has when standing before the Sphinx. It is not like facing a monument of men. It feels more like standing at the edge of thought itself, where human ambition meets eternity. Its face, though eroded, carries a kind of sorrow, as if remembering the hands that shaped it, the voices that once echoed in the quarry, the songs of labourers who are now dust. Perhaps they were not kings but priests, not conquerors but keepers of knowledge, those who believed that wisdom must be carved into permanence guarded by silence. They may have seen the sky as scripture, the sun as God, the horizon as the meeting of all worlds. To them, building the Sphinx may not have been an act of power, but of reverence, an offering to the rising sun, or to the cycles of renewal that govern life and death. Some traditions speak of the followers of Horus, a line of semi-divine rulers who reigned before the pharaohs, their deeds preserved in myth rather than record. They are said to have lived when the gods still walked the earth, before Egypt's written history began. Could the Sphinx belong to their time, a remnant of a forgotten golden age, later adopted and reinterpreted by the dynasties that followed? We cannot know for certain, but the absence of certainty is not emptiness, it is invitation. The Sphinx draws us into that space between knowledge and wonder, where imagination and evidence meet. Every groove in its stone, every missing inscription, feels like part of a deliberate design, as if the builders themselves wanted their identities to dissolve, leaving only the monument behind. It is strange, isn't it? The pharaohs obsessed over being remembered, yet the Sphinx's creators achieved something greater. They became memory itself. The afternoon heat thickens and the air trembles. The desert glows white under the burning sun. Tourists pass by, cameras in hand, their voices hushed by the scale of what they see. Few notice the details, the subtle curvature of the pores, the faint lines along the enclosure walls, the sense that the monument was not just built, but revealed, as if the sculptors had simply uncovered what was already there. In myth, the Sphinx is the guardian of riddles, a creature whose silence demands contemplation. And perhaps that riddle is not, what is man, but who remembers the forgotten? The builders without names may have known that eternity belongs not to those who proclaim, but to those who create something that needs no proclamation. The sun lowers and the shadows lengthen. The light slides across the Sphinx's face, catching the faint curve of its mouth. For a moment it seems to smile, not with pride but with understanding. They are gone, those nameless hands, yet their work endures. They speak not through words but through presence, through the calm that descends when the wind stills and the sky turns gold. Their silence has outlasted empires. Their anonymity has become their immortality. And as night falls again, the desert cools, and the stars appear one by one. The Sphinx's gaze remains fixed on the east, waiting for the next dawn. Somewhere beyond its eyes, past the horizon of history, lie the traces of their wisdom, those builders who asked for nothing but remembrance through the endurance of stone. But how did they do it? How could hands so ancient shape stone with such precision, lift such weight, align so perfectly with the heavens? The question lingers in the cooling air, restless as the wind that moves across the dunes. And from the darkness behind the monument, a new mystery begins to rise, the mystery of the silent engineers. Chapter 5. The Silent Engineers. The stars fade one by one, giving way to the pale silver of dawn. The plateau breathes again. Shadows stretch long and thin across the sand, tracing the edges of what was once the most advanced construction site on Earth. Here, where heat now shimmers and dust coils like smoke, something extraordinary was achieved. An act of precision that still defies the passage of 5,000 years. The Sphinx stands at its centre, carved from the living rock itself, its body shaped by hands that understood both the sky and the earth. To cut such a figure from a single mass of limestone would require not only strength but a vision that spanned generations. One misplaced strike could ruin everything, yet the builders succeeded. They worked not by chance, but by a geometry of faith. We imagine them there, the silent engineers, men whose names we do not know, whose faces have been erased by time. Their tools were simple, copper chisels, wooden mallets, ropes made from plant fibre, but their minds were vast. They studied shadows, measured stars, listened to the rhythm of the Nile. For them, engineering was not separate from devotion. To build was to pray with one's hands. When the first light struck the eastern horizon, they would stop and watch. The sun's position marked their alignment, guiding their measurements like the compass of the gods. The Sphinx, they knew, must face the dawn perfectly. It was to be the watcher of time, the lion of light. The angles, the symmetry, the proportions, all were designed to echo celestial order. The monument was both a map and a message, one carved for eternity. Modern instruments confirm their precision. The axis of the Sphinx aligns almost exactly with the rising sun at the spring and autumn equinoxes, a feat that would have required deep astronomical knowledge. The ancient builders were not guessing. They were following patterns written in the heavens. Each line of the Sphinx's form, each stone block of the surrounding temples fits into this larger cosmic harmony. The builders may have worked in silence, but their silence was deliberate, a quiet born of concentration, of purpose. Perhaps they believed that to speak would disturb the sanctity of what they were making. The air around them would have been filled not with chatter but with rhythm, the steady ring of hammers, the rasp of stone against stone, the murmur of wind through scaffolding. It was the sound of creation, of patience turning into permanence. In those days, before written plans and blueprints, everything lived in the mind. The foreman's voice guided the hands of hundreds. Each team knew its role, some shaping the paws, others smoothing the chest, others carving the face. They did not work for fame, they worked for order. The Sphinx was their offering to the cosmos, a reflection of balance between earth and sky. Even the materials carried meaning. The limestone of Giza, drawn from the same bed as the Sphinx itself, was chosen for its living quality. It was soft when cut, hardening as it dried in the sun, as though the monument was alive, curing itself in the breath of the day. The workers called it the flesh of the gods. To strike it was to shape divine matter, and when they carved, they did so with reverence. Each stroke of the chisel was guided by mathematics, but also by ritual. Before beginning work, they might have poured water over the stone, cooling it, blessing it. They might have sung prayers to Ptah, the god of craftsmen, or to Thoth, the keeper of knowledge. Creation was a sacred act. Precision was worship. Even now we can see traces of their technique, the clean cuts, the smooth joins of the blocks around the Sphinx's enclosure, the symmetry that still holds despite millennia of erosion. Some of these stones weigh hundreds of tons, far beyond what copper tools and human muscle alone should have been able to move. And yet they were moved. How? That question hums through every breath of the desert. Some believe they used sand ramps, hauling the stones with ropes and sleds greased with water. Others suggest that they carved channels into the earth and floated the blocks on barges during the Nile's flood season, guiding them like ships through an inland sea. There are even those who whisper of forgotten sciences, acoustic levitation, resonance, technologies that mirrored nature itself. Whatever the truth, the result remains the same. They mastered the impossible. But the most profound mystery is not how they built, but why they built. What compelled these people, these silent engineers, to carve something that would outlive them by thousands of years? Was it obedience to a king? Or something older, a longing to leave a mark not of power, but of meaning? If you listen closely, standing at the Sphinx's feet, you can almost hear them. Not their voices, but their rhythm. The heartbeat of their work still lingers in the air. The precision of their craft is a language that transcends speech. Every angle, every proportion, every alignment tells a story of devotion disguised as geometry. And perhaps that is the Sphinx's greatest secret, that it was not built merely to honour the gods but to embody them, to make divinity visible in the world of form, the lion's body, the human face, the alignment to the sun. Together they represent unity, the harmony of instinct and intellect, of matter and spirit. When the work was done, when the last stone was smoothed and the scaffolds taken down, the builders must have stood in silence, watching the first sunrise strike their creation. The light would have slid across the face of the Sphinx like water, filling its eyes with gold. For a moment, perhaps, they felt what it was to touch eternity, and then they left. The desert took them, as it takes everything. Their names faded, their homes dissolved into dust. But their creation remained, more alive than they could have imagined. It outlasted dynasties, earthquakes, empires. It watched men rise and vanish, watched gods change names, watched history forget. And still it waits, as patient as the day it was finished. There is a strange comfort in knowing that perfection can come from anonymity. The builders needed no monuments for themselves, they built one for all time. They trusted the stone to remember what they could not say. Their silence was their immortality. The sun climbs higher now, burning the desert in white heat. Shadows vanish. The Sphinx gleams like bone under the sky. The air trembles, and the stone seems to breathe. Somewhere beyond the dunes, in the buried remnants of an older world, other ruins sleep. Tools, carvings, fragments of walls worn smooth by sand. They whisper of a forgotten civilization that may have once thrived where the desert now reigns. The Sphinx stands as their monument too, the last breath of that age before memory, the voice of the world that came before. And as the wind turns, carrying dust across the plateau, it feels as if something ancient stirs beneath the sand waiting to be uncovered. Beyond the horizon of heat and light, the desert hides its next secret, the age before memory. Chapter 6. The age before memory. The desert looks eternal, but it was not always this way. Once the land where the Sphinx now dreams was green, a vast and living plain. Long before the pharaohs, before the first hieroglyph was ever pressed into clay, this place was filled with water and light. Rivers braided through valleys where antelope and gazelle grazed, where trees bent low in the wind, and rain fell from skies heavy with promise. It is almost impossible to imagine now, standing among dunes and heat, but the Sahara was once alive. The evidence still lies hidden in the earth. Fossilized fish rest in stone where no sea has touched for thousands of years. Ancient riverbeds cross the plateau like veins, dry now but unmistakable. Stone tools have been found in the sand, delicate, sharp, purposeful, relics from a people who lived not in the shadow of pyramids, but in the dawn before civilization had a name. These were the first architects of memory, shaping the world not through writing or conquest, but through survival and wonder. It is among their whispers that the legend of the Sphinx begins to stir. Long before the dynasties of Egypt rose, there existed cultures scattered across what would one day become desert. In the age of rain, they built with earth and stone, watched the stars and traced patterns of the heavens upon the ground. In southern Egypt, at a site called Nabta Playa, archaeologists have found a circle of standing stones older than Stonehenge, aligned precisely with the summer solstice. These ancient sky watchers, living nearly 7,000 years ago, may have been the ancestors of those who later turned their gaze toward Giza. The transition from that green world to the desert was slow, then sudden. The monsoon shifted south, and the rain began to fail. Year by year, the lakes dried, the soil cracked, and the people moved east, following the promise of water to the valley of the Nile. There they began anew, planting, trading, building, remembering. But perhaps they did not forget everything they left behind. Perhaps they carried fragments of their past, their myths and maps of the stars, into this new world of river and stone. Some believe the Sphinx is one of those fragments, a memory carved in limestone, a relic of an older civilization reborn through new hands. Its lion's body, its celestial alignment, its silence, all speak of something that transcends dynasties, something that remembers the rhythm of the earth itself. When we look at the Sphinx today, we see the erosion of time, but beneath that erosion lies another story, the erosion of memory. The people who might have built the Sphinx left no writing, no language that we can read. They left only form, the shape of their reverence, their fear, their hope. And in that form their thoughts have endured longer than any word. Imagine them, these nameless ancestors standing beneath a sun not yet cruel, their eyes lifted to the horizon. They would have watched the sky as farmers watch the soil, seeing meaning in every star. The constellation of Leo, the great lion, would have risen just before the dawn during the age of their world's decline. Perhaps they saw in it a sign, a reminder that even in dying there is courage, that even as the rains ceased, life could endure. Maybe they carved that message into stone, giving the lion a human face to show that man and nature were not separate but one. And then they were gone. When the rains finally ended, when the last green faded into dust, their villages vanished beneath the sand, the people who came after, the early Egyptians, found the traces of their passing, half-buried stones, tools, carvings. To them these remnants were proof not of ancestors, but of gods. The builders of the Sphinx, they believed, must have been divine, beings of power and light who shaped the land before mankind was born. So the myth began, and through it, the unknown was given sacred form. Modern archaeology has tried to piece together that lost age, but the picture is still incomplete. We find fragments, a grinding stone here, a shard of pottery there, and between them, silence. Yet even science acknowledges what the ancients already knew, that something immense preceded Egypt, something that laid the foundations for its greatness. Civilizations do not appear fully formed. They awaken slowly, like dawn breaking over the desert. In this light, the Sphinx becomes not just a monument, but a memory of transformation, the bridge between one world ending and another beginning. It belongs to both the age of water and the age of sand. Its body remembers the rain, its face endures the sun. It stands at the very threshold where humanity learned to build not for the moment, but for eternity. If you stand before it at dusk, when the wind cools and the first stars appear, you can almost feel that transition. The desert hums with quiet, the same quiet that once filled the air when the lakes dried and the people left. The horizon glows faintly, and for a moment the past feels near enough to touch, not through history, but through presence. The Sphinx does not tell us who carved it, nor when. It does not need to. Its existence is its own answer. It says, "We were here, we dreamed, we endured." There is something deeply moving in that idea that a civilization can vanish, yet still speak through the shape of a single monument. The builders may be lost to time, but the language of their stone remains fluent. It speaks to every generation that stands before it, reminding us that we too are temporary, and that what we create outlives what we can explain. Perhaps this is why the Sphinx feels so human, despite its alien stillness. It carries within it both the triumph and tragedy of all who have ever built and been forgotten. It is not just a lion or a god. It is memory given form, the spirit of all who came before us, watching through eyes of stone. The night deepens over Giza. The air grows cool and still. The sands whisper softly, shifting with the gentlest of winds. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the echo of rainfall lingers, the memory of a world where water shaped the land and the stars guided the hands of its builders. And as the moon rises, casting pale light over the Sphinx's face, you begin to feel that ancient age stirring again, not gone, merely sleeping. The stone gleams faintly, as though remembering the green fields and silver rivers of its birth. The age before memory was not lost, it was transformed. It became the silence beneath the noise, the foundation beneath the sand, and yet, as the centuries passed, even that silence began to change. Kings rose where shepherds once walked, stone replaced clay, and prayer became politics. The Sphinx, already ancient, gained new meaning and a new voice. For one night, long after its builders vanished, a pharaoh dreamed that the Sphinx spoke, and when he awoke, the legend of the Dream Stela began. Chapter 7. The Dream Stela and the Voice in Stone. There are moments when the past seems to breathe, when legend and history blur into the same wind. One such moment came under the reign of Thutmose IV, a prince, not yet a king, who wandered into the sands of Giza more than 3,000 years ago. The desert then was as it is now, vast, golden, and patient. The Sphinx lay half buried, its face worn and its body swallowed by dunes. Its gaze still faced the dawn, but its mouth was silent, its meaning forgotten. The story says that Thutmose came to hunt in the shadow of the Great Pyramids. The air shimmered with heat. His chariot wheels carved shallow tracks across the plain. The Sphinx was little more than a mound of stone, its head rising from the sand like a memory half awake. We can imagine the prince pausing, dismounting, standing before it, young, uncertain, caught between the weight of lineage and the whisper of destiny. He sought shelter in the shade of the Sphinx's neck and fell asleep, and in his dream the stone spoke. "I am your father, the god of the horizon," the voice said. "Free me from the sand that buries me, and I will make you king of Egypt." When Thutmose awoke, the desert was silent again, but the promise lingered in his chest like fire. He returned with workers and tools, and the sand was cleared away. The Sphinx, once more revealed, rose in glory against the dawn. Soon after, Thutmose became pharaoh, the living embodiment of the dream's prophecy. To commemorate the event, he carved a stone tablet and placed it between the paws of the Sphinx. That tablet, known to us now as the Dream Stela, still stands there today, weathered, cracked, its inscription fading under centuries of wind. But its story endures, the tale of a man who heard a voice in stone and listened. The Dream Stela marks more than the restoration of a monument. It marks a renewal of reverence, the moment when Egypt remembered what it had forgotten. By Thutmose's time, the Sphinx was already ancient, already wrapped in legend. Even to him, it was not something built by his ancestors, but something inherited. His dream gave it new life, a divine voice in an age that had begun to lose touch with the origins of its gods. And perhaps that was the purpose of the dream. In Egypt, dreams were not mere shadows of sleep. They were messages, portals between worlds. To dream of a god was to be chosen by it. Thutmose's vision connected him to something older than his bloodline, older than any dynasty. By hearing the Sphinx speak, he became part of a continuum, a bridge between the forgotten builders and the kings who came after. Even now, standing before the Dream Stela, you can see faint traces of hieroglyphs describing the prince's vision. The carving shows Thutmose offering incense to the Sphinx, which looms above him like a mountain of life. The text calls the statue Horemachet, horizon of the sun, identifying it with the god Horus, the eternal watcher of the eastern sky. It describes the Sphinx not as a monument, but as a living being, a presence that demanded care and remembrance. This was how the ancients understood the world. For them, stone was not dead. It could speak, dream, and demand devotion. A monument was a body. The god within it was its soul. To restore the Sphinx was to heal the divine. But what if the dream meant more than a king's prophecy? What if it was also a metaphor, a warning from the past? The Sphinx's plea to be freed from the sand could just as easily be the voice of forgotten history itself, calling out to those willing to listen. It asks not only for restoration but remembrance. It calls to every age, "Do not let me vanish again." The wind blows softly through the Giza plateau, and you can almost hear that ancient voice echoing across time. It does not speak in words but in stillness, a silence that invites the imagination to fill it. For centuries after Thutmose's reign, the sands returned, burying the Sphinx again and again. Each time it was uncovered, the people of Egypt renewed their awe, reaffirmed their devotion. Each rediscovery was an act of rebirth. The Sphinx seemed to sleep and wake with the rhythm of civilization itself. In the centuries that followed, travellers and priests, philosophers and conquerors all stood before it in wonder. Some believed it to be a god, others a riddle. The Greeks would later name it Sphinx, after their own myth of a guardian creature that tested the wisdom of men. Yet the Egyptian Sphinx is gentler, not a questioner, but a witness. It watches, it endures, and through its silence, it teaches. When the sands swallowed it once more, it is as if the desert itself decided to protect the mystery, to cover what mankind could not yet understand. Beneath that sea of gold, the Sphinx waited, timeless, patient, guarding the memory of an age before language. And so, the dream stealer became both record and reminder. It told the story of one who heard the ancient voice and answered. It linked human ambition to the divine whisper of the earth. It made the Sphinx not only a relic, but a participant in the life of Egypt, a being that could sleep and wake, lose and regain faith, forget and remember. Even now, the Sphinx's face carries something of that dream, a trace of awakening. Its gaze is eternal, yet weary, as though it has watched too many dawns and waited too long for the next listener to hear its voice. The wind smooths its cheeks, the sand reshapes its body, but its essence remains untouched, the message of the dream still alive in stone. Perhaps every civilization hears such a dream in its own way, a quiet reminder that knowledge buried by time is never truly gone, only sleeping beneath the dust of our forgetting. When Thutmose stood before the Sphinx, it was not a god that spoke to him, but memory itself, the living echo of those who came before. He freed it from the sand, and in doing so freed a piece of the human story that had been silenced. But what other voices might still sleep beneath the dunes? What other chambers, sealed and waiting, hold the secrets of civilizations erased by wind and time? As the stars wheel above Giza and the moonlight paints the Sphinx in silver, the question lingers. The dream stealer is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a deeper mystery. For beyond the pores of the Sphinx under the bedrock of the desert, legends speak of something hidden still, a hall of records, a chamber of forgotten knowledge waiting to be found. And so, as the night drifts toward dawn, the wind begins to whisper once more, calling us toward the next secret, buried beneath the gaze of the eternal guardian. The Hidden Chambers of the Sphinx. Chapter 8. The Guardians of the Hidden Chamber. The air is cool now, the kind of desert calm that hums with unseen life. The Sphinx looms in silhouette against a pale horizon, its face half shadow, half light. It has watched for thousands of years, through conquest, restoration, neglect. Yet beneath its paws, beneath the limestone plateau itself, the greatest mystery may still lie untouched. For centuries, whispers have surrounded the Sphinx, not merely of its creation, but of what might rest beneath it. Travellers, priests, mystics, all have spoken of secret chambers sealed by stone, chambers said to hold knowledge older than Egypt itself. They called it the Hall of Records, the Library of the Gods, the Vault of a Forgotten Age. To most historians, this is only legend. But legend in Egypt has a strange way of circling back toward truth. The idea of hidden chambers beneath the Sphinx began long before modern archaeology. In ancient times, the priests of Heliopolis told of a place where the first wisdom of humankind was stored, a sanctuary created by divine hands to preserve the secrets of the stars and the birth of civilization. Later traditions from Greek to Arab chronicles repeated the tale, that within or beneath the Sphinx lay the scrolls of Thoth, the god of knowledge, maps of the heavens, records of an age before the flood, before time began. The Sphinx's enigmatic form seemed to invite such myths. It faced the east, aligned perfectly with the rising sun. Its size and silence spoke of more than artistry. They spoke of guardianship. Many believed it watched not only over the Giza plateau, but over something buried deep below, something meant to be protected until the world was ready to remember. When explorers in the 19th and 20th centuries came to study the Sphinx, they found signs that deepened the mystery. Beneath its massive paws, seismic instruments detected hollows in the bedrock, voids that could be chambers or simply natural fissures. Some claimed to see blocked tunnels carved into the limestone near the temple walls. Others spoke of hieroglyphs hinting that the Sphinx was built atop an entrance, a gate between worlds. No solid proof has ever been revealed, and yet the question refuses to rest. Standing before the monument at night, one feels it, that subtle pressure of expectation, as though the ground itself remembers what we do not. The Sphinx does not only guard the horizon, it guards time. Beneath its paws, the earth feels thick with possibility, the kind that hums just before revelation. Modern science has tried to pierce the veil. In the 1990s, researchers used ground-penetrating radar to map the subsurface of the Giza plateau. They found several anomalies, geometric cavities, rectangular spaces where no natural erosion could have carved such forms. Some appeared directly beneath the Sphinx's enclosure. When questioned, Egyptian authorities dismissed them as geological formations, but the measurements lingered, like questions without answers. Other scientists, cautious and skeptical, argue that the Sphinx's supposed secrets are symbolic, not literal. They say the Hall of Records represents not a physical chamber, but the accumulated wisdom of humankind, knowledge stored in the collective spirit, waiting to be rediscovered within. Perhaps the Sphinx guards that truth, reminding us that the greatest vaults are built not in stone, but in memory. And yet, there are those who still believe the chamber is real, that somewhere beneath the lion's paws lies a sealed door, its entrance hidden beneath the weight of time. Explorers and mystics alike have sought it. Some claim to have found inscriptions describing it, others visions. In the 20th century, the American psychic Edgar Cayce declared that a Hall of Records would one day be discovered near the Sphinx, revealing the history of Atlantis and the origin of all civilizations. His followers, driven by that vision, searched for decades, convinced that the desert still held the key to humanity's forgotten dawn. Whether fact or faith, the search itself says something profound, that we feel instinctively that the past has not told us everything, that beneath every history lies another deeper one. The Sphinx embodies that feeling. It is the lock and the riddle both. Perhaps the truth is simpler and more mysterious at once. Perhaps there is no single chamber, but a network, a labyrinth of hidden rooms stretching beneath the plateau, built to mirror the stars above. The pyramids, after all, are aligned with the belt of Orion. Their corridors echo celestial order. Could the Sphinx's unseen foundations be part of the same cosmic architecture? An earthly map of the heavens, carved into stone to remind us that the sky and the earth are one body. Imagine, if you will, that the hidden chamber does exist. Not a library of scrolls, but a vault of silence, a place where the builders laid their final prayer. The air inside would be still as eternity, sealed for millennia, undisturbed by the living world. Within it perhaps lies not treasure but truth, a record not written in ink but in geometry and resonance. The ancients may have understood that sound, proportion and vibration could preserve meaning across time better than language itself, and so they built the Sphinx as a cipher, a guardian whose silence is its message. The Hall of Records may not contain parchment or script. It may be the Sphinx itself. Every measurement, every alignment, every curve of its massive form could be part of a code, a story carved in mathematics and myth. The more one learns, the less certain one becomes. The Sphinx resists conclusion as fiercely as it resists decay. Perhaps that is its purpose, to remind us that mystery is sacred, that not all truths should be unearthed at once. Still, the dream persists. Even now, archaeologists use new technologies to probe the bedrock beneath its feet. Subsurface scans reveal hints of tunnels leading from the nearby temples, and ancient texts suggest passages once connected the pyramids to the Sphinx. Corridors of initiation, symbolic paths between life and death. Each discovery deepens the enigma instead of solving it. The closer we get, the more infinite it becomes, and maybe that is fitting. The Sphinx, after all, is the gatekeeper of balance, between knowing and wondering, between earth and sky. Its guardianship is not of stone vaults, but of awareness itself. The wind rises slightly, sweeping fine dust across the plateau. It gathers in faint spirals around the Sphinx's pores, as though the desert itself is tracing patterns we can no longer see. For a moment it feels as if something beneath is shifting, not physically but in the mind's eye, where imagination and belief intertwine. If there truly is a hall of records, perhaps it will never be found by machines or drills. Perhaps it will open only to understanding, when humanity remembers not only how to measure the stars, but how to listen to the silence between them. The night settles again. The stars gleam cold and bright. The Sphinx remains unmoved, eternal, as if guarding a secret that breathes without air. But in every seeker's heart, in every scientist's curiosity, the same pulse endures, the longing to rediscover wonder, to feel again that first thrill of standing before something greater than comprehension. And as the dawn approaches, light begins to creep along the horizon, washing the stone in gold. The Sphinx's eyes catch the glow, and for an instant, they seem alive. Perhaps the chamber below, real or imagined, stirs with it. Beyond the myths and the measurements, one truth stands clear. The Sphinx continues to awaken us to awe, and that awe, like the morning light, leads onward toward rediscovery, revelation, and the renewal of wonder. For the world is never done revealing itself to those who keep asking. And beyond this silence, a new century of seekers begins to rise. Chapter 9. The rediscovery of wonder. The wind moves differently at Giza now. Not with the ancient hush of caravans or the chants of priests, but with the murmur of cameras, the hum of machinery, the low voices of those who come to study and record. The Sphinx, once buried and forgotten, stands uncovered once more beneath the same unbroken sky, and humanity has returned, not as worshippers, but as seekers of truth. The rediscovery of the Sphinx has happened not once, but many times. Each age, it seems, must find it anew, as though the desert itself chooses when to reveal and when to conceal. The last great uncovering began in the early 1800s, when explorers like Giovanni Battista Caviglia and later Émile Barrès began clearing the sand that had swallowed it nearly to its neck. What they revealed was astonishing, not a ruin, but a survivor. The Sphinx's body, long entombed, still bore the marks of ancient chisels. Its enclosure walls displayed patterns of erosion older than history's memory. The world was captivated. Artists sketched it. Scholars debated it. Mystics dreamed of what it symbolized. Napoleon's expedition had already brought the Sphinx to Europe's imagination, and now, with its form laid bare, the fascination deepened. It became not merely an Egyptian relic, but a mirror for every civilization's longing to know where it came from. Yet for all the tools and theories of the modern age, the same mystery remained. Who built it? When? Why? The question refused to yield to science or story. It lingered like the desert heat, invisible but inescapable. The 20th century brought new eyes and new methods. Archaeologists measured, photographed, mapped and compared. The most daring among them proposed that the Sphinx was far older than Egypt's Old Kingdom, older even than the pyramids themselves. The evidence lay in the erosion. The deep rounded patterns along its body, they said, were not the work of wind-blown sand but of water, rainfall, and heavy rainfall at that. But rain like that had not touched Giza since long before the pharaohs. If the Sphinx truly bore the scars of water, it must have been carved during a time when the land was green, when rivers crossed the plateau, when the Sahara still bloomed, perhaps 10,000 years ago or more. The idea unsettled historians, yet it also rekindled something ancient in us: wonder. The possibility that an unknown civilization, long vanished, had left behind this silent colossus thrilled the imagination. For the first time in centuries, science and myth seemed to move in the same direction, both pointing toward a forgotten dawn. Some dismissed the theory as romantic speculation. Others defended it with passion, arguing that humanity's past was deeper than its written record. The debate continues to this day, each side certain and uncertain in equal measure, and through it all, the Sphinx waits, indifferent to our arguments, patient as eternity. It is strange how the closer we look, the more elusive it becomes. Modern instruments probe its body, scanning for cracks and chambers. Drones trace its contours, satellites measure its shadow. We can map its every inch, yet we still cannot reach its essence. Technology has revealed details but deepened mystery, as though the Sphinx itself guards not a secret of stone, but a secret of understanding. Even those who study it most closely admit to something that cannot be quantified. Standing at its feet, they describe an overwhelming stillness, not emptiness, but presence. A sense that the Sphinx is not just an object, but a consciousness of time. It has absorbed millennia of wind and worship, myth and inquiry, and now reflects them back at us like a mirror. In its silence, we see our own questions more clearly than our answers. And so the rediscovery of the Sphinx has never truly been about archaeology alone. It has always been about wonder, about the return of awe to a world that often forgets how to feel it. We rediscover it not because we dig, but because we look again with new eyes. the Sphinx teaches us that mystery is not a failure of knowledge, but the beginning of wisdom. Perhaps that is why it endures. For every generation that believes it has mastered the earth, there comes a moment of silence before the Sphinx, a moment that humbles, softens, and expands. It reminds us that we are not the first to dream, nor the last to forget. Its eyes have seen our rise before. They have watched empires swell and crumble, watched faiths bloom and fade, and still they gaze east, toward the place where each new morning begins. In recent years, technology has returned to Giza not with conquest, but curiosity. Teams of archaeologists, physicists, and engineers now use non-invasive methods, thermal imaging, muon tomography, ground radar, to look beneath the surface of stone. Some discoveries are astonishing. Temperature variations hint at unseen cavities. Geometric voids beneath the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid suggest passageways that have not been mapped. But even these findings, as precise as they are, offer no certainty. Each revelation seems to open 10 new mysteries, as if the monument resists being known all at once. And maybe that resistance is its gift. Maybe the Sphinx endures precisely because it cannot be reduced to fact. In an age that measures everything, it remains immeasurable. It stands not to be solved, but to be felt, to awaken in us the quiet knowing that some truths must remain infinite to stay alive. If the Sphinx has a message for us, it may be this: knowledge changes, wonder endures. There is something sacred in that thought. As the world grows louder with data and speed, the Sphinx keeps its silence, reminding us that awe is the root of all understanding, that to kneel before the unknown is not weakness, but reverence. At sunset, when the crowds thin and the light turns amber, the desert falls silent again. The air cools, and the colour of the stone deepens. The Sphinx's face, carved and eroded, seems to breathe. Shadows fill its eyes, and for a moment it feels almost human, as though remembering something, or perhaps forgiving us for forgetting. The rediscovery of wonder is not about finding answers beneath the sand. It is about remembering how to listen, how to let mystery speak through stillness. The Sphinx is not waiting to reveal a chamber. It is waiting for us to hear what silence sounds like. As night rises over Giza, the stars return, ancient and unchanged. They shine on the same curves of stone they lit thousands of years ago. Somewhere, a lone researcher switches off his lamp and looks up, realizing that the sky above him is the same sky that guided those first builders, those silent engineers. In that realization lies the connection the Sphinx has guarded all along, the continuity of wonder. And so, though the world may have changed, though we build towers of glass and steel instead of limestone, we are still the same, still seekers, still dreamers, still children of curiosity, standing before the infinite and asking softly, why? The Sphinx does not answer. It never does. It simply remains, a teacher in stone, instructing without words. But as the dawn begins to shimmer on the horizon, painting the desert in pale gold once more, the feeling returns that humanity is part of something vast and enduring. That wonder, like the sun, must rise again and again, no matter how many times we forget. And beyond that sunrise, beyond the golden dunes, waits the final revelation, not of stone, but of spirit. For the Sphinx was not built to last forever in form, but to live forever in meaning. And through that meaning, the forgotten builders will speak once more, in wind, in memory, and in the breath of time itself. Chapter 10. The Builders Remembered in Wind. The day begins softly over Giza, a faint hush before the light. The air is still, the dunes unmoving, as though the desert itself is holding its breath. And then slowly the first rays slip over the horizon, washing the Sphinx in pale gold. its features come alive again. The brow, the weathered cheeks, the silent mouth shaped by vanished hands. Every sunrise feels like the first, and every dawn a reminder. We stand before it, as countless others have, and we feel small, but not diminished. There is comfort in the enormity of its gaze, in the thought that this monument has outlasted everything: kingdoms, storms, and the fragile certainties of history. For thousands of years it has absorbed the breath of time and given back only stillness. The builders may be forgotten, their language dissolved into dust, but their creation endures. In that endurance, they live. The Sphinx is not simply a riddle, it is a mirror. It reflects back to us our own longing to be remembered, to leave behind something that whispers our name long after the wind has carried our voices away. The pharaohs tried to claim eternity through inscription, through lineage and gold. But the ones who carved this monument, whoever they were, found a deeper immortality in anonymity. Their silence was deliberate, almost holy. To them, perhaps, the act of creation was itself enough. To carve the desert into permanence, to give the rising sun a face, that was devotion. They did not need their names to be known. Their names were written in shadow and light, in the alignment of stone to sky, in the way the Sphinx gazes forever toward dawn. We can imagine them, not as kings, but as souls moved by wonder, engineers who studied the stars, sculptors who shaped with purpose, thinkers who believed that the world was an echo of the heavens. To them, the Sphinx was not only art or monument, but prayer, the embodiment of balance between the animal and the divine, between strength and wisdom, between man and eternity. And so they carved it, and in carving, they spoke the language of forever. Today, we have forgotten that language. But when the wind moves through the plateau, you can almost hear its rhythm, not words, but intention. The desert carries their memory in patterns of sand and air, repeating it endlessly, softly. We may have lost their names, but their message endures each morning when the sunlight returns to the Sphinx's eyes. Be still, look east, remember. There is a humility in that message, a grace that feels both ancient and new. In our search to understand who built it, we are really searching for ourselves, for the part of humanity that once built not for wealth or conquest, but for meaning. We chase their shadows through history, hoping to learn not just what they made, but why they made it. Perhaps they built the Sphinx not to guard treasures, but to guard silence. Perhaps it was a reminder that mystery itself is sacred, that some things are meant not to be owned or solved, but felt. The ancients understood that truth and awe are twin forms of the same light, and that light does not fade, it transforms. Over the centuries, the Sphinx has seen our many interpretations. It has been called Horus, Ra, the image of a king, the mark of gods, the relic of a lost world. Yet it remains all of these and none. It belongs to every era, every civilization that stands before it and wonders. Its meaning is as fluid as the sand, changing shape with each generation that gazes upon it. The modern world, with all its tools and knowledge, still kneels in quiet before this monument. Scientists measure its age. Philosophers ponder its purpose. Poets fall silent beneath its gaze. The Sphinx unites them all in one truth, that the essence of human life is not certainty, but curiosity. Even now, the desert continues to reveal small gifts, fragments of pottery, traces of walls, the faint outline of what might have been workshops or quarries. Each discovery adds a sentence to a story we will never fully read. Yet maybe the beauty lies in that incompleteness, in knowing that something vast and luminous has touched this place, and that its echo still shapes us. At sunset, when the desert cools and the colours deepen to rose and amber, the Sphinx becomes something otherworldly. Its face, softened by shadow, seems to lift toward the fading light. The last warmth of the day brushes against it like a blessing. The pyramids glow in the distance, their sharp lines blurring into the horizon. It feels as though the whole plateau is exhaling, as if the world itself is remembering the hands that shaped it. Those hands are gone, but their art still breathes. Each grain of sand that touches the Sphinx's paws carries a trace of their labour, each gust of wind their unspoken vow. We were here, we dreamed, we built for the dawn, and that dawn comes again, endlessly. It always will. The Sphinx does not age in the way we do. It does not measure time by years or kings. Its clock is light, its memory is stone. We come and go, bringing with us our stories, our theories, our reverence. But the Sphinx remains, unchanged in its purpose, a bridge between the finite and the eternal. The forgotten builders are not lost to oblivion. They are everywhere the wind touches. They live in the patience of stone, in the courage of those who still ask questions, in the yearning that drives us to understand what came before us. Their legacy is not only the Sphinx, it is the persistence of wonder itself. And so, as night returns to Giza, we look up once more. The stars shimmer above, scattered across the same heavens the builders once watched. The wind cools. The desert, vast and luminous, seems to listen. Perhaps that is the truest meaning of the Sphinx, not a monument of answers, but a conversation across millennia. We speak to it in questions, and it replies in silence. Its gaze, steady and kind, seems to say, "You are part of this story too. You too are builders of eternity." The camera lingers now on its face, the cracks, the lines, the softness carved by wind and time. The light fades slowly until only the outline remains, dark against the glittering sky. Somewhere in that stillness the story finds its breath, and so the journey ends as it began, beneath the gaze of stone, under a sky that has never forgotten. The Sphinx continues to dream, watching over the sands and the centuries, whispering through the wind to those who still listen. If you found peace in this quiet passage through time, may you carry it gently with you. Perhaps, before sleep, you'll think of the builders, not as ghosts, but as voices in the wind, reminding you that every dawn is a continuation of theirs. The desert settles, the night deepens, the Sphinx watches the stars turn once more, eternal, serene. And as the last echo fades into silence, the world exhales, the sand cools, and the story returns to its dream. Good night.